All right. I don't see anybody else here, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with our little session for this morning. I want to let you know that I have invited my CHE 121 and 122 students to this. So I will be differentiating a little bit between some of the things that are different in these last few weeks of the course for both of you. So make sure you pay attention to that. Okay, let's go ahead and share the screen. Hang on just a second. Let me do that and get this all set up. Okay, I'm sharing my entire screen with everyone, and we're going to go into the course. Hang on just a second. I don't know what happened there. Okay. Just give me a second here. I'm not sure what happened. My course disappeared. All right, there we go. Just 1 second. All right, we're going to go in. I'm going to go into the 121 course. So those of you who are in 122, just be aware that there's one thing that's different for you than for the other students. The first thing I would like to do is go over the lab report instructions one more time, because a lot of people are not following them and they're not doing things correctly. And I'm a little bit frustrated sometimes because I've been sending out emails to people who are not doing well on their lab reports and giving them great feedback if they go in and look at their lab reports. And also I've sent a couple of starfish reminders out. So if you're still doing poorly on your lab report, please, look at those emails I sent you, because I gave you a bunch of hints on what you can do to be better. But let me go over that first. So let's go ahead and open up the lab report instructions that you can find. It's in the week 0 area under lab reports. You'll see it there if you go, but here's what it looks like. And basically you're writing a report in APA format, which means that you must have a title page, right, in APA format, and you've got to have on the other end of your report a reference page. All right. The other things that need to be done here is you need to double space your report. You need to watch your grammar and your spelling and all that kind of stuff. I am going to look at that kind of thing. So make sure that you are doing that. And I'm going to show you the rubric one more time in just a few minutes that will tell you kind of how you're graded on that. All right, so there are 4 sections in the actual report. The first one is the introduction, and here is where you're going to read the background for the lab and then summarize it. So in this section, you should include the lab objectives. If there's a scenario about the lab, like for example, you're in a laboratory that's trying to do something, that would be your lab scenario. You also would want to put any definitions or calculations that somebody might need to know about if they were reading your lab report. So everything that's in the background, please summarize. And then also anybody who wants to, and I love it when students do this, go out on the internet and find some other stuff. Like right here, it says find additional sources. So if you happen to run across something that applies to that lab, go ahead and include it. Then in the introduction, you're also going to have a hypothesis stated. And I would like to see everybody say, I hypothesize that. And then whatever your hypothesis is. Do not plagiarize a quote. Copying and pasting is not allowed in your lab report. And some of you have found that out the hard way because I've marked you down for that. All right, so that's the introduction. I'm going to talk more about what a good hypothesis and a bad hypothesis are when I get to the rubric. We'll do that in a few minutes. Methods and materials. This section is basically where you're going to summarize the procedure of the lab. So summarize it enough that someone reading it could kind of see what you're doing, but you don't need to put every detail in there. All right, so just a basic summary. The results section and the discussion section are the two most important parts of your lab report. The results section is where you're going to enter any data. If you are provided with like a table, please use that table to input your data. And then below that table, you want to do any calculations that you need to show in that table. For example, like if there's a change in temperature, like temperature final minus temperature initial would be change in temperature, right? That would be something you want to put below that table. So, and a lot of times in this course, you're using formulas. So you would want to write the formula down and then show the work for each of the steps. Okay, so that is very important because I do mark off for not showing work. Also, if there's any graphs or anything like that you need to include, then please put those in there as well. So that's the results section. And then finally, we have the discussion, which is the conclusion. Please don't do two things, like do a discussion and then do a conclusion too. This is, according to this particular lab report scenario here, this discussion area is the conclusion. So just title it discussion. All of these should have headings on them. So this last one is just the discussion. And in this one, you're going to summarize the lab with any important results that you have to analyze. And you're going to talk about those. For example, if you are identifying what's the best coolant out of two unknowns, then you would write down which is the best coolant, and you would explain why you're determining that. Or if you're finding the identity of an unknown, then you would explain that. Whatever you're doing in the lab that needs explanation, that should be in this discussion area. Somebody should be able to read the discussion and kind of understand what you did in the lab and what the reason for the lab was, and you know, what you found. So you're also going to discuss whether your hypothesis was supported. Like I said, I'm going to go over hypothesis in a few minutes, whether the lab objectives are supported. So yeah, right here, how do the results affect the theories you discussed in the introduction? So that's kind of the lab objectives. Do they confirm or disagree? All right. And then anything else you want to add? I really like to see it when students apply the lab to something else, to something maybe in their life or in their career, or maybe something that they suspect they're going to have to do later in a future course, something like that. All right. And then lastly, you're going to do your reference page. So this is just a review of what you're supposed to do in the lab reports. And like I said, I have really tried to help people who are not doing well with these, but with some success and not success. Let me just mention something here. I do offer a lab review option. If you send me whatever you've done on your lab report by Saturday at noon, I will give you a little bit of a review. I'll look through it and I'll make suggestions. For example, let's say that you did your calculations wrong for a certain portion of the lab. I might say something like, check those calculations, you're using the wrong formula or whatever. But I will help you try to improve the lab report. So that's a great option. I don't have a lot of students taking advantage of it, but those who do are doing much better on their lab reports now, because they, you know, I give them suggestions on what they should do to improve. All right, so let's move on. I do want to talk about week 7, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here to week 7. And this is going to be different for the 121 students and the 122 students. Because in week 7, the 121 students have, whoops, let me move back up here, have a lab that's like their lab 2, where you're going to click on the lab and it's going to open up a little quiz, and then it's going to tell you, okay, do simulation 1, wave on a string, and then it's going to have a whole bunch of questions you're going to answer, and you're going to answer the questions thoroughly, following the directions. Sometimes it's going to tell you, answer this in 7 to 10 sentences. Well, if it says that, then you need to do 7 to 10 good sentences, not like little short cut off sentences where you could have combined all of those little short things into one sentence. I'm looking for good sentences. So this is what week 7 looks like for the lab in CHE 121. You are not doing a real lab report. Those of you who are in 122 are doing an actual lab report in week 7, just like always. All right, so there's the thing I'm going to mention about week 7. Now let's go ahead and go down to week 8 deadline information. Okay, you're not going to see this yet because you're still in week 7 and working on week 7. However, on October 1st, which is on Sunday, this will open, and it's just like a little quiz. I guess it's called a quiz, but what you're going to do is you're going to click on this, and you're going to be asked to confirm that you understand the deadlines for week 8. And then you're going to click on that, and that's going to be your promise to me, your confirmation to me that you understand the deadline. So you can't come back later and say, oh, I thought that deadline was this time, because when you click on this, you're saying, I get it. All right, so everybody understand that. All right, here's the deadlines. Pretty much the first 4 things here are the same as always. The first post for the discussion is due on Wednesday. This is for next week, for week 8, not this week. We're talking about next week. So we're talking about September 4th. So this is next week. And then problem set 1 is due on Thursday, like always. Problem set 2 is due on Saturday, like always. And then the final discussion posts are due on Sunday, like always. So these first 4 things are just like they have been all term. However, you will not be doing a quiz in week 8. You will be doing a final exam, and I'm gonna show you that in just a minute. And then you're also going to be doing your last lab report that week. All right, now both of these, the final exam and the lab report, are due on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Okay, everybody make a note of it. You can see I highlighted that here because that's a weird time for stuff to be due, right? I kind of agree with you. I'm not sure why they decided to do that, but everything is due at 9, or those 2 things are due at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. So once you agree to this, you are understanding that the 9 a.m. is a deadline. And I actually have students who like turn their lab report in at 8:55 a.m. I'm not kidding. There are students that do that. Maybe you're one of them, and that's fine. I mean, if you get it in on time, then I'm just fine with that. All right. So there's a schedule for week 8. Now I want to do one more thing before we go. I want to go, I am in MM 121 right now. So if you are in MM 122, basically it's kind of the same thing here. It's just the lab is different. So I'm going to go ahead and go into week 8 because I want to show you the rubric. And I just want to mention to Leah, if she watches this, that this is not hurting you at all. I just had to click on somebody to show the rubric and upload the rubric to the site. So I just chose the first person in the list. So this, I'll remove this later. It will not affect you, submitting your lab or anything like that. You just happen to be this first person on the list, and I needed to use somebody to show the rubric. All right, so let's do that. Let's show the rubric. because I want to go through a good and bad hypotheses here. All right, so here we go. I'm going to show the rubric. Here it is. Let me kind of just expand this out a little bit so everybody can see it. All right. So there are 5 criteria, and those of you who have been improving your lab reports and reading my feedback and that kind of thing, you're probably aware of these criteria here. Those of you who have just been doing the same thing over and over and getting bad grades might not be aware of these and didn't watch the first live session that I did. But let me just go through this so that we can finish strong, everyone. I want everybody to finish their lab report strong. For the CHE 121 students, you only have 1 more lab report to do, but those in 122 have 2 more lab reports to do. So please finish strong. Let's do that. Okay, criterion 1 is format. And I kind of mentioned this when we were talking about the lab report instructions, that it has to be an APA format. So in other words, you got to have a title page and a reference page. Your sections should have headings on them. Everything should be double spaced. There should be no errors in spelling, or very few errors in spelling and grammar and that kind of thing. So, that one's pretty easy for you to get a 4 on, because most of you probably have written a lot of papers in APA format in college, and so you're really familiar with that whole idea. So a lot of people get 4 on this. If you forget your reference page or a title page, then you might get a 3 or a 2, depending on what else is going on with your lab report. All right, criterion 2 is introduction and methods. Remember that the first 2 sections were introduction and then methods and materials. We combine those into one grading section. So what is expected here is that you are totally summarizing the background for the introduction, giving the lab objectives, a scenario, any definitions or formulas, that kind of thing that you need to use. And then for the methods part, you just summarizing the procedure. Make it a good summary, one that someone could read and understand what you're doing, but you don't have to be really detailed about that. All right, so that again is worth 4 points if you do it all correctly, and then obviously you can see that you can get several different grades on that. Now, this is the one I want to talk about, because this is where some of you are having trouble. And I don't have a problem at all with you sending me your proposed hypothesis so that I can take a look at it and tell you, some ideas about how you can improve it. I'm not going to give you what the ideal hypothesis is, but I will tell you, yeah, you might want to work on that or something. All right, but let me go through what a good hypothesis and a bad hypothesis is. All right, I'm going to talk about the last lab in 121. And those of you who are in 122, probably if you didn't take this course here, won't remember this lab, but those of you who are in 122 that took 121 will remember this lab. Okay, in lab 6, you were asked to find the best coolant out of 2 unknowns. And the lab scenario was you work for this auto industry. You're trying to find a better coolant than some of the ones that are available, and they ask you to do that. All right. A bunch of people said the following. Oh, let me give you the good hypothesis first. All right. So a good hypothesis would be, if I find the specific heat of my 2 unknowns, I can determine which one of them is the better coolant, because the one with the higher one is the better coolant. All right, so that would be a good hypothesis. A bad hypothesis, and this is doubly bad because the goal of the lab is not to do this, but a bad hypothesis would be to say something like, I predict that the identity of unknown 1 is aluminum and the identity of unknown 2 is water. Okay, you can't, number one, you cannot predict that before you do the lab. You can never predict the identities of something unless like there's a color, like if something is colored yellow and you know that one of the unknowns is yellow or one of the known things is yellow, then you might be able to predict that. But in this case, no, you can't predict that at all until after you do the lab. And number two, that was not what you were asked to do in this lab. You were asked to find the best coolant. You don't really care what the identity is. You want to know, is X or Y the better coolant? All right, so that would be a really, really doubly bad hypothesis because number one, you're not talking about what the lab actually is the goal of the lab actually is. And number two, you cannot predict identities. That's just something you can't do unless, like I said, unless there's like a some kind of a cheat thing like a color or something. All right, so that is the hypothesis. Note that even though the hypothesis goes in the introduction, it's got its own 4 points. So it's a very important part of your lab report. All right, and then criterion 4 is the results. That's, I already went over this a little earlier, but you're expected to put any tables there, fill in the data, show your calculations. If there's a graph or some kind of an image or something that you need to show, do that. There are labs where those are required. So that's criteria 4. And then criteria 5 is the discussion or the conclusion. And I did already talk about what's expected in that discussion area. So these are the 5 things that you're graded on. And hopefully everybody is listening and they see this now, because I would like everybody to finish strong. Okay, so that's that. Let's go ahead and close that. And basically, I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our screen. Oh, hang on a second. I gotta stop sharing here. Okay. I'm going to go back here and see if anybody came in, which it doesn't look like they did. I'm pretty much done. If anybody has any questions, please, just, email me. I'm very happy to, walk you through anything that you need walk through or whatever. Okay, so that's it for now. Let's finish our term strong, everyone. I'm enjoying working with you, and I would really like to see us all be very extremely happy with our learning in the course. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end now.